test.
All right, so I'm Melissa, if you guys needed to remember my name. But I, 2 weeks ago, went to a conference with my work with Arrive Ministries, and it was a conference for a lot of people that work with refugee ministry. But the theme was a new thing, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about the theme verse for that. So the theme verse was Isaiah 43:19, but I'm going to read a couple verses at the beginning of the chapter to give a little bit of context. So verses 1 and 2 said, but now thus says the Lord, he who formed you, who created you, O Jacob, who formed you, O Israel. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. You are mine. Or I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. So that's kind of the context, is the talking about danger and fire and high waters. So I think what that is showing me is that hard times are a given and something to expect, but that God walks through them with us. And then I just love how it talks about how he created us and he called us by name, so our identity is in him. So then the theme verse of the conference was verses 18 and 19. So they say, remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. It springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. So the speaker that talked about this verse, she pointed out that it's talking about God doesn't necessarily say he's going to make waterfalls or highways in the desert, but it says a path in the wilderness, or I guess my version that I read said a way in the wilderness, and it said streams in the desert. So sometimes we want God to make a highway, or we want him to send a waterfall. And she was shared even about a time in her own life where God did that, and I can think of a couple times where I feel like God did really big things, but the speaker was pointing out that sometimes we have to look for the little miracles that God is doing every day, the streams. And she said sometimes God uses the wilderness, or sometimes God dries up rivers to create them or move us into a new direction. So specifically for me, working with refugee ministry, you guys have probably seen a lot of stuff in the news. You know it's a hard time to be an immigrant or a refugee in the U.S. And currently we are at the lowest cap ever since we started the refugee resettlement program of refugees that we're admitting in the U.S. this year. So it's an easy time to be discouraged as someone who works with refugees, but at the conference they had people come and share like what are ways that God is doing new things in refugee ministry, and what are new directions that he might be asking us to go in, as opposed to looking at the old things or what used to be. And I was kind of thinking about, in relation to this class too, we've talked about a lot of different terms. We talked about how God has used migration and globalization, and then even new terms like ethnoburbs, about people moving from places that used to be not very diverse, certain suburbs, and now they're really, really diverse in our own city. And I feel like we have kind of two options. We could ignore it, or kind of wish that things go back to the way they are, but maybe God is asking us, like we've talked about in this class, what unique new things is he doing? Just like that's why this class is called MissionShift, that God is doing new things in the world of mission. So yeah, I'll just close in prayer, that we can be ready and thinking about what new things is God doing. So dear Lord, just thank you so much that we're yours, that we don't have to fear even when our life seems like it might be a desert, or you might be leading us in a new direction. But I just pray that we can have open eyes to what new things you're doing, even through this class. What are you asking us to do, or how to respond based on what you're doing in this city? So we thank you for opportunities just to learn more about that, even through the ministries that are going to share today. And I pray that we can just have our eyes open to those small streams or paths that you're making for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
is every place on the planet. Migration is every place on the planet. People today are going from everywhere to every place else. And one of the things that's drawing people to the United States is not only prosperity and pain on the other end, but the fact that we have a tremendous labor shortage. And there's no way around that. And but I can't get over some of the vicious things people are saying in this election about immigrants. Thoughtless, ignorant statements, and it's like people don't have a clue. Now, we don't want to argue with people, but simply sharing people some facts that, okay, people, we have a labor shortage, and it's going to get worse in the next 5 to 7 years. The rest of your life and your children's life and your grandchildren's life, unless something drastic happens on this planet, we're going to have immigration, and it's going to be from everywhere to every place else. And that's simply the way it is. So anyway, thank you for your word, and it's a challenging time. It's good we've got something to challenge us, right? All right, if you pull up the MissionShift Institute Neighborhood Ministry Project and paper. Now, this will be due at our last class session, which is December 17th. Now, at some of the colleges, you might be done a couple days before that. Now, we did this one particular way for many years, and because of challenges with some of the colleges and because of the busyness in nonprofits in December, a lot of nonprofits, a huge part of their giving for the year comes in December, and so they're extremely, extremely busy. One of the units that's on your chart there, our calendar, is called Entrepreneuring the Church. And I think that starts next week. It's either next week or the week after. And I'm going to spend 2.5 nights talking about what's God's idea of mission, and how do you get an idea, bring people together around it, communicate it, and with no money, on bare dirt, how do you create something? Now, I've spent my entire life building or mostly rebuilding ministries. And God has a great desire for people to lead and to bring things together and build. And you don't need millions of dollars. You just need somebody to say, hey guys, let's go do this. And that's all it takes. But it takes eyes that see and ears that hear. And hopefully we'll give you some tools that allow you to do some very simple things. Now, normally we would teach that class first and then give you this assignment to go out and analyze a ministry. Now, every ministry, whenever they give their presentation, including when I'm giving a presentation for MissionShift, this is a perfect ministry. I mean, it does an amazing thing. Look at our 4-color brochure, and it's been around for 24 years, and we've had 1,000 people go through our class, and this is really cool and be a good thing for you to give money to or for you to take classes of and so forth. Every ministry has all kinds of challenges. They make all kinds of mistakes. I was just mentioning one of our members is the vice president of the Billy Graham Association. He worked for them when they were in Minneapolis, continued to work. He was the last of the old guard that went to Charlotte when they moved to Charlotte. And this guy started out in the accounting department and ended up for the last 20 years as the vice president of finance, the CFO. And he'd invite me over for free lunch every once in a while in the Billy Graham cafeteria. And I remember one time, probably 20 years ago, saying, Joel, it must be so much fun to work for an organization like this because it's, I mean, you guys are the gold standard. You're just the best of the best. Everything's so organized, and look at all you get done. And he laughed out loud. He said, if only you knew. You know, every ministry has points of chaos. Every ministry is, their chaos, their challenges are things like when the federal government comes in and says we're going to do a massive audit. And when they do a massive special audit, in this case, there may have been some agendas going on too. You can imagine that every penny has to be accounted for, and it's thousands of hours of time. So, what are we going to be doing? Okay, tonight we've got 4 ministries that we have a great deal of respect for, and they're going to come, and the speaker's going to introduce themselves, and they have different roles in each of their organizations, and they're going to come and they're going to talk about, they're going to give you the elevator speech. If you ran into them in an elevator, they're going to explain to you what they do. And these are all good organizations, like I said, we have a great deal of respect for, have worked with for many, many years. And in fact, the first one, Jesus in the City, the very first year, 24 years ago, when we had this class, the guy that's been the pastor of that for the last 23 years was part of that first class. And part of his, what he learned to put the church together was something he learned in this class. And he certainly had many other gifts and many other things that he brought to it. But anyway, all right, so let's look at this. Goal of the project. Goal of the Neighborhood Ministry Project and paper is to get you out of the classroom again and experiencing cross-cultural ministry hands-on, this time focusing on the mission, vision, and leadership skills needed to start and grow a ministry. Criteria for analyzing a ministry. Review these questions with the nonprofit ministry leader during your interview session. The answers to these questions will provide the material for your paper and presentation. So you will gather together in your group. You'll find a time to go meet with the executive director of the groups. Now, not all the executive directors are coming tonight, but you're going to meet, and they're going to give you a couple hours to go through as many of these questions as you can. Try to cover the gambit if you have to drop out a question or whatever. So I like to start with the question of all the things you do, what are you most proud of? Because it's always good to have them start talking about what they're proud of, and they're excited to do that. And it builds a little relationship, and then like questions like, what is their central ministry? Who is it to? How is it focused? When were they founded? By whom? What was the need? How long was the original leadership in place? When and why was it changed? How often has the leadership changed? How is a ministry different from other ministries with the same mission? Okay. Now you may not have time for all these things. But again, we want you to get a broad understanding of how does it actually work. You're trying to peer into the machine. It's, if you've ever have messed around with a copier, the outside of the copier looks so nice, and it's got all these buttons on it and so forth. You start tearing it apart, and there's all these little tiny moving parts in it, which I don't dare touch, and probably you shouldn't either. But ministries are made up of a whole bunch of little parts, and some of them are covered with black toner dust, and they're, it's kind of looking at a ministry from the outside, it can be kind of almost like mysterious. How does this thing really work? Well, they all work differently. Okay, so questions about leadership, next page, vision, gifts. What are they looking about for, how are they understanding growth? What are the prime areas of focus? Stuff about funding. How do they do communications? What kind of cultures, other cultures have they worked with? How has that gone? What's their theology of prayer? And then, okay, and if they go down a bunny trail, that can oftentimes be fruitful, but don't let them go down the bunny trail to the point that you don't get anything covered, okay? Pastor disasters are often awfully good at getting off on a tangent. I won't, of course, not me ever. Anyway, okay, so the paper is going to be a report outlining your findings, typed, double-space, 1-inch margins with title, due date, and authors centered at the top of the first page, 12-point type. There are 8 sections, and there should be 1 page per section for a total of 8 pages in length. Bring a printed copy to class. Now, you do that together as your group, so if you want to split it up and write it that way and assemble it, you can do that. Now, this is due in December, and your other paper overlaps with it, which is when you go out and you have a couple of encounters. So you may be able to combine those somehow, or stop and have supper someplace while you're doing, coming down for this. Presentation, it's going to be a PowerPoint presentation, and not everybody has to know how to do PowerPoint, but somebody in the group knows how to do it. PowerPoint's a fairly simple sort of thing. Stick a picture in, write a couple of words, so on. 10 or 15 slides addressing the ministry. You'll have 15 minutes to present and 5 minutes for questions and answers. Make sure to time yourself. You will be marked down for going over time. Be concise. Slides must be in widescreen mode. Please save and send as PowerPoint or PowerPoint X. Can you save Google Slides in PowerPoint format? Can you do that? Okay. I like to save these things. Okay. Slides are due by Sunday, December 16th, 2017 at midnight. Now, you can tell that Tom Olson's used to dealing with college students, and so deadlines and so forth that are very, very crisp. Yeah, we should do those things, and we will keep them crisp, but I'm not here to destroy your life, but get your stuff done, okay? And get going on this. So once you've met the people, we're going to be signing up for the groups. We will be drawing. We'll have X number of slots under each of the ministries, and then we will draw out birthday months out of a hat. Somebody get a hat? Somebody get a hat? We'll find something, okay? And we'll draw birthday months, and then whoever's birthday month comes out. So if you're a March and we pull March, then the March birthdays go sign up. So that's as random as we can get it. And if we draw November last, and you happen to be a November birthday, well, you get whatever's left over. So sorry about that. It's really weird. Some years we'll have nobody for a whole bunch of months, and all of a sudden we'll have like 6 people in the same month. Like, how'd that happen? All right, let's hear our first presentation. Come, will the mystery guest enter and sign in, please? Ooh, dude. In the 1950s, there was a show called What's My Line? And you can watch those on YouTube. And that was all I said, will the mystery guest enter and sign in, please? Okay. I can pretend I'd like to be a real-time, big-time radio announcer when I grow up. Pat Sajak. No, I'm Vanna White.
I've seen Vanna White. You're no Vanna White. I'm Pastor Norton from Jesus in the City. Weird name, huh? Anybody remember the old Honeymooners TV show with Jackie Gleason in it, huh? And his best friend, his buddy, who lived in the apartment upstairs, was named Norton. And he'd holler out the window, "Hey, Norton!" Everybody, let's do that. 1, 2, 3. Hey, okay, now you know who I am. I know there's words on this paper somewhere here. The pastor there already told you part of the story, which is that our church was birthed right out of this church and out of this class. The date was November 8th of 1995, and God placed a vision in the mind and on the heart of our lead pastor, Pastor Michael Pila, Italian guy from the east side of St. Paul. God woke Pastor Pila out of a sound sleep and showed him a vision of the skylight. We're talking about vision here. God puts a vision in your mind. It's kind of interesting because we're doing a sermon series right now on the prophets, on the minor prophets at the end of the Old Testament, okay? And God gave almost every one of them a vision, which was to go send some kind of warning to the Hebrew people. And what happened with Pastor Michael is he got this vision of the skyline of the Twin Cities, and sticking right up out of the middle, this cross. And he sat on the edge of his bed and he thought about this. I think it's right between the Fauché Tower and the IDS building. I just made that up, okay? We don't know that for sure. God told Pastor Pila to go plant a church in the city. In the city. And that's the key. When God says go do something, what do? You go. Like when God told Abraham, go to the land I have promised you, you get up and you go. You don't, you say, well, where am I going? Abraham didn't know. God didn't tell him yet. Just pack up, get going. Try explaining that to the wife. Okay? You get up, you get going. Well, he told him to plant a church in the city, and what we did was plant a church that's in the city. Therefore, we're called Jesus in the City Fellowship, and we're not leaving. The problem, as God showed Pastor Pila, is that churches in the city grew, and the congregations grew, and they started moving to the suburbs, and they needed more space for a larger campus, and pretty soon everybody has left, and there's nobody remaining in the city. There are fewer and fewer churches, fewer and fewer Christians left in the inner city, and our call, the vision, answering God's call, God's vision, is to fill that ministry void, is to be Jesus in the city. And like I said, our pastor's slogan is, "And we're not leaving," okay? Our church was birthed out of this church, but we're pretty interdenominational. Pastor Pila was raised Roman Catholic, but received his call to ministry while he was working at North Heights Lutheran. So he attended a Baptist seminary and then interned here back with the Lutherans again. And our pastoral staff today includes Southern Baptist, American Baptist, Roman Catholic, Assemblies of God, Lutheran, and an Episcopalian. They're okay, they're Christians too. Most of them are retired, so they're not on staff, not salaried people. But we've all come together to serve. We're chartered, therefore, as an alliance church by International Ministerial Fellowship, IMF, which is an organization that commissions a lot of chaplains, ordains some pastors, and facilitates a few churches, and we're one of them. 22 years ago, services began right here, and our itinerant ministry has been up and down Lake Street for years, in and out of the Phillips neighborhood, in a number of locations, and currently we meet as the primary service at the Akina Church building, about 30th Street and 33rd Avenue. We're on the other side of the tracks now, as they say. In the past, that building was home to a native congregation, and many of them have stayed with us. They continue to come there and worship, even though, as you might say, the management of the building changed. That connects us to a native congregation in North Minneapolis, which is called God's Royal Family. And we lead services up there for them. We help them because they're declining and they need the help. And it connects us with the Little Earth community that's just right up the road from us. And recently to the tent city that's growing outside of Little Earth community. Just last week we brought them care packages with clean, dry socks and with toiletries and coats and blankets. And we share the good news, put a little gospel message, a little New Testament message in with that. We are also deep into recovery ministry. We work with several treatment facilities. And what they're good at is trying to get people off their chemical, whatever the drug of choice is. What we do is bring Jesus to it. We give them regular Bible studies once or twice a week in these places. We give them a church service, what they call a chapel service, in their building, on their property. This is in addition to what our church does. We go there and put on another church service. Personally, I've done a church service for the New Hope Center. It's about 28th and Cedar. It's a men's recovery program, inpatient recovery. I've done a church service for them for over 20 years. Just one a month, but 20 years. And I've continued that through 3 different churches. Let's see. We provide them with music, with preaching, the whole deal at their facilities. And we're a partner church with one of these treatment facilities that sends their men to our worship service every Sunday morning. So they get used to coming to church, they know what Jesus is, and they hear our messages. Because of all those things we're involved in, it just kind of leads us into helping single parents. It leads us into helping those trapped in poverty. We host a Women of Influence conference every year and a twice-a-year financial restoration conference. Big help for a lot of these people. One thing I didn't write down, but we should talk about, we have a program called Christmas in the City. We don't have to fund it because we find other people, benevolent people, and corporations and companies and other churches that want to be a part of this. And they give us the funds or they give us the stuff, and we get Christmas presents for the kids, and we get food for their Christmas dinner. And through a partnership with Bachman's, we can put a Christmas tree in their living room. And we deliver it all to their door, and of course, along with the message of Jesus. And we don't drop the ball there. About the third week in January, they're all invited back to our church, and they all pretty much come because we did all this stuff for them in December. And we will go pick them up. We will drive them to the church. And we have a meal after the church service that day. But we bring them all back. We all meet each other. We see what goes on at the place. They hear the message. They hear the fellowship. They learn about Jesus one more time. Our church is unusual in that almost everyone who attends is serving in some way. It's like a whole bunch of leaders that all got together and we're going to worship together. And then most of the ministry doesn't take place in our church. It takes place outside. We go to the treatment facility. We go to the Little Earth. We go to God's Royal Family. We go here. We go there. If people were to come to our church and say, well, what's your youth group do? Well, we don't really have one. You know, what's the Sunday school class? Well, we got a lady that'll watch a couple kids if they come, but usually it's the adults. It's these people that came there to serve. We have people that have joined our church that have left other churches because they felt they were, give me a butt in the pew, just not doing anything. And they came to our place because we're doing stuff. We're helping people. We're changing lives. And so, I guess for all that I've told you that we do, all that we accomplish, our congregation is smaller than you might think. We're funded, if you follow this through now and think it through to its logical conclusion, we're largely funded by outside sources. We have corporate sponsors. We have larger churches that sponsor us as a smaller church. We have individual sponsors, people who are called to help Jesus in the city stay alive. We have people who tithe to Jesus in the city who have never attended a worship service there, but they believe in the ministry. We've given away Bibles. We've given away coats. You've heard it said that there's no free lunch, but that's not true at Jesus in the City Fellowship. Once a month we have that community meal following our service. Free. We don't even put out a Goodwill basket. No, just free. We've dealt with the multiracial, multi-language, multicultural neighborhood, and we have brought Jesus back into the city where it needed a boost. That's what we were called to do, and we're just answering the call that God has put out for us. We try to tell everyone about Jesus, and we try to do it with love. Thanks for having us. Questions? Questions? 3, 2, 1. No. Yes.
Do you have any stories about life change? People whose lives have changed.
I also do music at our church, and there's a young. Use the mic. Oh, yes, sir. I do music at our church as well, and there's a young girl from one of the native families who is kind of nonverbal, but she's been taking violin lessons. And so we had her work on He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. And she worked on How Great Thou Art and a couple other things like that. And she comes in and she plays the violin solo, and our band accompanies her. This girl and her sister and her little brother are being raised by their grandmother, because there's a generation missing there. There's that missing generation. The parents are lost on chemicals, they're lost on drugs, they're lost in poverty. They might, in some cases, they're imprisoned. When we go up to God's Royal Family in North Minneapolis, it's all grandmothers with their kids, with the grandkids. Entire generations missing. So there's a changed life. She actually spoke to me 2 weeks ago, but she didn't ever talk before. And when she plays the song, and when we talk to her and we play, and she smiles, and that never happened before. It's going to take a while to, fully bring somebody out. But she's suffering from fetal alcohol syndrome as well. So, you're starting life without the advantages that most of us would have. You're trying to climb your way up out of the pit from the get-go. And that's one that just really comes to mind. There's another guy who's been through a treatment program, I think 3 or 4 times. But he made it now, and he's been sober over 2 years. And he got a boiler license, and he's now our building engineer. Yeah. So that's it. Okay. I think we're about time here, so.
Somali adult literacy training. How long ago did SALT start? 20 years ago?
2003.
2003, 15 years
Yeah,
ago.
that sounds right.
And Mike Nieder showed up here one day, and we offered him some office space, and they were with us for quite a while. And do you need a microphone there, or what do you need?
Just gonna plug this in.
Okay. Anyway, it's an outstanding vision, and it's having a tremendous impact, not only in reaching out to the Somali community, which is probably as distant a community as we have here in the Twin Cities, culturally. And very difficult, very distant. Some of the stuff the Somalis were taught in the camps regarding church, Christianity, Christians, and so on. Very inaccurate and a lot of fear. And Mike Nieder is an outstanding human being, amazing vision. It's even they're even having an impact of just hit the net, just escape. Anyway, so is that enough introduction?
That's enough.
Okay.
Perfect. Hey, everyone. My name is Chris Castillo, and I've been with SALT for about 2.5 years. Kind of a long story how I got involved in it.
Can you use the microphone, please?
Yep. About 3 years ago, I've been working in corporate America for 25 years, and in marketing. And about 3 years ago, I was just grieved. I was hating what I did. I hated working working on the kind of things I was doing. And you'd think, why would that be? It's medical device. It's helping people. And I was just, something in my heart just was just, I had enough. And, but that's not enough. It's not enough just to be dissatisfied. You can't go, God, I just want to get out of this. You placed me here, but I just want to get out of it. I just waited on the Lord, and I continued to bring it to him. I said, hey, God, I don't want to do this anymore. And as I prayed, and I had other people kind of pray with me and counsel me on this, finally, I just felt God gave me a release and said, yeah, you can go. I said, awesome. Now what, right? Now what? I don't have a job. And he said, that's okay. And as I prayed further about it, one of the things that I thought he told me was, set aside some time for me. I want you to set aside, 25% of your time, and that's for me. And you can kind of do whatever else you want, set aside that time. So I said, okay. I actually started working with a company that I helped start up 25 years ago, and that was going back and forth to the Philippines. So that was, I loved that. I hadn't been back to the Philippines in like 20 years, and so that was really awesome. But then I was going, what is this 25% supposed to do? And I just felt God said, you need to work with immigrants. And once again, you're kind of like, okay, that's really broad. There's like a million things we could do. And since I'm connected up to the Philippines, should I be working with that? And so I once again, I'm praying through this, and an opportunity came up just down the street at the Horns. I don't know if you know, there's a twin buildings down there on 24th and 5th. And it's a public housing building, subsidized housing. And they had invited Mike Niederer in and said, hey, would you guys like to start up a SALT tutoring center here? And the way SALT works is we don't do anything unless somebody is called. So is somebody called to start up that site? And he's not going to start unless somebody is called. And I had been talking to him a couple times, and he just kind of said, hey, is this something that you would like to do? And kind of interesting, I had actually lived about a half a block from there right after college. And I wasn't saved at that time. And as I prayed about it, I just felt like God said, yeah, you should do this. So that's kind of how I got involved in SALT. I have no literacy background at all. I don't know, when I got into it, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And, people came along and helped me out and said, hey, this is what you should be doing. Or, start with this. And so I've kind of stumbled around for about 3 years doing this. We've got somewhere between like 10 to 15 students that come 3 times a week. They would love it if we were 5 times a week, but I don't have quite the faith of saying, hey, we can do this 5 times a week, since we've got all volunteers. So anyway, that's just a quick intro. That's crazy. That's an intro, okay? So our focus today is really on 3 things. One, why are Somalis in Minnesota? And I don't know if you guys have covered this in your course, but I'll kind of give my perspective on it. Talk about what is SALT and what are we doing at 5th Avenue. Oops. So this is my story. So this is my mom's family. 2 generations ago, went from Sweden and came to the United States, eventually got up to Minnesota via Michigan. And that was back in, so she's from, they moved up to Taylor's Falls, all Swedish community there. And so then this is her, she moved, her family moved. Then there's some gentlemen that lived in Minnesota, and they played basketball. This is back in the late 1950s, and they went on a trip to the biggest basketball playground in Asia, which is the Philippines. Even though the average person's 5'2", they love basketball. So they went to the Philippines, and lo and behold, my dad is a doctor, or is becoming a doctor, and they played an exhibition at his school, and my dad got to talk to him. My dad's 5'8", huge Filipino. He was the second tallest on his college team. And he was talking to these guys, and they said, hey, we heard you're going to the United States. And my dad said, yeah, I'm going to Johns Hopkins. And they said, wow, that's a great school. You need to come to Minnesota, though. He's going, Johns Hopkins, why would I go to Minnesota? And the answer was really simple. The women are beautiful. That was the answer. And my dad, the next day, filled out his application, sent it in, and came to Minnesota. So lo and behold, he actually met my mom, who was a nurse, and they got married. So many years later, obviously, I'm here. So what I get from that story is, I'll go through this, is God moves people. And so really my questions when I think about this are these four. And one is, does God participate in our lives? And I would bet everyone here would say yes, right? God somehow participates in our lives. I think he has plans for everyone here on this planet. We always hear about if he died, he would die for one of us, if not all 7.5 billion. Does God still speak to us? Does God speak to us on a daily basis? And does he move people on a daily basis? I think he does. And where does God move people? So, this is proof, if you look at the Bible, right, God was in the people moving business right from the get-go, right? You start off in Genesis and he's moving, Abraham, right? He moves Moses. And I won't go through this whole list, but you guys, I think, get this, right? He moves Jesus. He moved the early church, right? The church was growing in Jerusalem. And what did he do? Boom, he exploded it out, right? Then it was stable or growing in Europe, and what did he do? Great persecution came. Boom, he exploded it out. So then you look at today, and you look at the number of refugees that are around the world. And some people would say that's just evil happening, right? I would say God's moving. God's moving. There's more refugees than there ever has been. And is that an accident? Is that something that God is not in control of, that he's kind of going, oh, that's kind of interesting? I don't think so. And I think, in fact, I keep on doing this. I'm going to put this away. Sorry. So why? What's next? So I think he moved Somalis here for a reason. I think he's moved many Hmong here for a reason. And my conviction is the reason is that because he's talking to his people. If you didn't know, the reason the Hmong came here was, anyone? Why did the Hmong settle here? Yeah, so in order for an immigrant, a refugee, to come to the United States, they have to have a sponsoring body, right? The sponsoring body in Minnesota was basically the churches, right? Is the Catholics, the Lutheran Social Services. Why am I blanking? Jewish. There's a Jewish community as well, and then an evangelical community as well. And they're the ones that basically said, hey, we'll receive them. That's the exact same thing happened with Somalis, right? Basically, they lifted their hands and said, yeah, we'll take them. So I think God is speaking to his people, and he's saying, hey, bring them here. And so the question is why? And if once again, my conviction is a lot of these people, they could never hear the gospel where they were at, right? We all know part of the reason I think the Arab Spring happened, right, a couple years ago, was because they could never hear the gospel in those places. So God basically exploded that and sent them out so that they could hear the gospel and then go back. So that's my conviction, and that's why I think that there's a really strong connection, and really that's why SALT was founded, is based on that conviction. So a few things about SALT. Our mission, They added this, actually, this first part, making disciples. Initially, it was just, we shared Jesus with our Somali neighbors through literacy and friendship. And that was our original mission. We've really felt that we've built relationships, we've built friendships, and we can take that next step. Now, I would say in my program, it's 3 years old. I'm not ready to do that necessarily yet. I mean, if God obviously touches somebody's heart and they come to Jesus, obviously I'm going to disciple them. But, there has to be trust built. We started in 2003, and the type of literacy programs in general that SALT has. So we do in-home tutoring. So a family will call us and say, hey, I have 5 children. We'd love to have you tutor them. And we'll find a tutor that lives in that neighborhood, and we'll go in and just love on that family. We have drop-in tutoring centers, right? So you basically have a room like this, and you'd have some tutors, and maybe some Somalis would drop in, and you get tutoring. And then we have classroom programs. So, once again, it'd be a place like this, or it could be in a community room like we have, and we basically have a class 3 days a week. And we have different levels in the class, or maybe if you have a big enough program like Bethlehem Baptist, they actually have different classrooms. So it can be a variety of ways that we do this. All of this is volunteer-led in most cases. Bethlehem Baptist, I think they have 2 or 3 full-time or part-time people that lead their program. Most of the others, it's all volunteer-led. You guys can ask questions. I don't like talking this much, but I'm sorry. So if you have any questions. So this is the building. If you haven't seen it, it's just down there, public housing building called the Horns, a large Somali population, an elderly Somali population. I think the average student is probably 60. And just a little something to think about. So they didn't have a written language until 1972. So almost all of the people that are there, I was saying all, half of the people that are there basically don't know their ABCs. They don't know how to read in Somali at all. The others, some do, and most of the men do to a degree. They learned Italian or English. Most of them know the Quran, so they've got some literacy. And there's about 200 apartments there. As I said, we've had probably 50 different people run through that program. Some sticks, some don't. Some come for the coffee, then leave and don't come back. And so we've had different people coming and going. We have about 10 to 15 people that are pretty core right now. So this is kind of what they have. Their background, it's actually kind of sad, as one of our volunteers kind of described a typical person. This is Howell, and she would be fairly typical. She immigrated here as a refugee. She has no family in the Twin Cities. Really funny lady, but has no family here. Is extremely lonely. Comes to this meeting, and it's kind of, I would say, one of the highlights. She just kind of sits down and hugs people. And funny story, my wife actually helps me every once in a while, and we were doing a health unit, and her and my wife are kind of chatting, and we're going over parts of the body. And this woman starts pointing to private parts of the body. And my wife is like, what do I do? Right? And so my wife, would go, she would point to something, and my wife would go, oh, it's this, right? Very quiet. And Howell would go, it's this? My wife's like, Be quiet. So she's hilarious, but and she comes really often, and we have a great time. All of them are Muslim, as you would guess, and sometimes that gets contentious. I won't lie. I mean, we've talked a little religion once in a while, and they have been taught very well by their mosques of how to go after Christianity. I mean, even though these people are, especially the men, even though the men are fairly illiterate or low literacy, they know how to defend their faith, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to do a real quick, this is actually a story that we used. 1 minute. Perfect. So this is a story that we use, a prodigal son. Okay? So we walk through it. I'm not going to go through the story for you guys because you guys know it, correct? Just nod yes if you do. Okay? So this is what I asked them. Should the father have done this? Should he have let the younger son take the money? Should the father let the younger son back? Would you? And who do you like best in the story? Okay, and Christians, right? We all have the same answer, right? Of course. The favorite is the father. He's great. He's awesome. Their view was not so much. The father was an enabler. The father was not a good father, in fact. He was a bad father. And the good one in the story, obviously the younger son was terrible. He shouldn't be come back at all, and if he should, it should be as kind of a servant or a slave, right? The older son, now that's a good son, because he was upright. Okay? So this was interesting to me, right? I mean, these are the cultural divides that we have to get through, right? And how are you ever going to get through if you don't have a relationship with them? You're never going to get through. You have to be able to, they have to be able to trust you, and you have to be able to work over this over a period of time. Because this is a huge divide, right? Since that's my 1 minute, thanks. Questions?
What year they came to the U.S. as refugees?
So I have people that have been here 15 years, and some that have come, within the last year.
It was the early 90s when it was the Civil War started in Somalia. So
Right.
that would be like the earlier people.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, it's interesting to hear why they came here, and I've heard some of the stories, that there's actually a sultan that came here, and he was kind of one of the draws that brought a lot of them kind of through here. So, other questions? Thoughts? Anything to add?
You always need help at Fifth Avenue. Or at a lot of salt sites. So
Yeah.
give me if you want to plug in or Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you've never done it, it's a different type of ministry. I'll tell you that, because it's very engaging, and it's not a very scary thing, but it's very engaging because you're actually just serving them and talking to them. Yep.
So, question, volunteer, we haven't done it, what's the commitment? So, time-wise and then longevity-wise, assuming you don't want somebody to just come for a day.
I run my site a little differently than others do. I'm a little more I would say a little more flexible than many of the sites. Ideally, I would like somebody that comes weekly, because I think builds that relationship. And ideally, I think it would be a 2 to 3 month thing at least.
But we do have a policy that people can volunteer, they can try it out like 2 times while they're just trying to decide if they want to make a longer commitment.
All right. We have to let you go because we have to stay on our timetable. Well done. Very nicely done.
All right. Thank you.
Very good ministry, and Mike Niebuhr is not only an amazing believer and a solid guy with a tremendous vision. He also, if you were to He looks like family. And my dad was 5'3" and my uncle was 5'1", so this all fits in. Now, do you speak Tagalog?
Konti lang.
Okay, okay. The Rich is back there served. Oh, you talked that over. Okay.
Yep.
Very well done.
Thank you.
All right, very good. I'm going to give you a quick introduction here. For many years, starting back in the either late 60s, early 70s, Augustana Lutheran Church, which is now almost defunct, with Russell Lund of the Lund grocery store, who was a member of that church, said, well, we've got to do something for the poor people. And they created something called Community Emergency Services, which is here in the neighborhood. And that church came under some new leadership, and for various reasons. And they moved away from the evangelical message. They wanted to become a secular service provider. And John Bonesock had worked with them for much of the time that they existed, as did Jeff Noed. Jeff is now the director, and when I was 20 years old, I was Jeff's confirmation teacher. He was then 12, and so I've known him for just a little bit. So anyway, these are people who not only understand poverty, but they have served for decades and decades. Now, in Community Emergency Services, they fired the people who were just, as far as I'm concerned, John Bonesock and Jeff Noyed are the best care providers in South Minneapolis. The wisest and most understanding, and they know everybody and everything there is to know. And they knew all the people that came in. They had a card catalog, yes, on real life paper slips, of everybody that had come in there and had been there in the last 35, 40 years. Well, when all this happened, they started working with Bethlehem Baptist. They moved a couple miles further south, and they created Jericho Road, like the story of the Good Samaritan. And whenever I have a question, whenever I am stumped, the first people I call, I have them on speed dial, are John Bonesock or Jeff Noed. I have, again, when I say profound respect about these different groups, I'm not joking. These are people for whom I just think their ministries are extremely solid, and they're the kind of people you should be modeling on. So we're going to hear a little bit about Jericho Road, and it's yes. You don't like the flicker? Yeah, and especially, I'm just wondering if any of these need to be wiggled. Did that help anything? Do you have a PowerPoint?
I have a PowerPoint, but I don't have to use it if it's better not to.
I think maybe we'll shut it off if you. Sure. Okay, you guys have got such an amazing story to tell that I think it's very compelling. Oh, here's the microphone right here. Very good.
I'm neither John, obviously, or Jeff. I like to think of myself as Jeff's minion. My name's Dana. I'm serving with them, and Pastor John and Jeff say hello, Pastor Roland. Yeah.
By the way, Pastor Bonesock is the only person who makes many moves. You get the cheapest in the building and have to follow the pollution control.
I'd like to read the passage that our ministry is kind of based on. So, in Luke chapter 10, verse 25 and following, very familiar, the parable of the Good Samaritan, but I'd love to read through it again for you as I talk a bit about the ministry. Luke 10:25, and behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He, Jesus, said to him, what's written in the law? How do you read it? He's asking this to the lawyer. And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" He said, "The one who showed mercy." And Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." Jericho Road, in many ways, the ministry is based off of this passage and applying this passage in the context of our neighborhood. All around us, there are people who have maybe not physically been mugged, or maybe have been physically mugged, are in different challenges in life. They're broken. There's so many layers of brokenness, and the desire of Jericho Road Ministries is to come in and to show mercy. Jesus speaks of this one that the Samaritan here had shown mercy. As we're going through the passage, we see that as he encountered the man broken on the road, he had compassion. And that's one of the key things that distinguishes him from the 2 that had gone before, that he had compassion when he saw him. Now, to give compassion, we have to first understand the compassion that has been shown us by God. We are that one on the side of the road. We might think, what character are we? But before God, we are the broken one on the side of the road. And God sent his Son to come and die for our sins and to show mercy on us in our plight, and to give himself for us. And as we approach ministry in the inner city and in any context, we are always doing that out of what God has shown to us. And so, Jericho Road, we want to show mercy to physical challenges. We have a food shelf. We have an afternoon kind of a dry goods, non-perishable item food shelf that we have open. Friday mornings we have a produce distribution. We pull the community together and give out thousands of pounds of food every Friday morning. There's physical needs there. We have interviews, and we have some financial assistance that we do, from housing to utilities at times, and transportations for funerals. We help people with applications and resumes and birth certificates and things that are needed, not just for emergency relief, but for development as well, and helping people to get on their feet. Much as we see in this story, that the man who comes by, he meets that immediate need of saving his life, really, in this case. But there are times when we want to help in an emergency situation, and we do a lot of that. But then beyond that, he's bandaging the man up. He's putting him on his mule and taking him to the inn, and kind of seeing it through to the end to see this man get back on his feet. And so, as well, we're wanting to work not only in an emergency relief, but also in development, thinking through how do we help somebody not just have food for the week, but be able to get back into the workforce if they've been out for a while, to figure out transportation and various things, so that they're able to grow beyond this point. And so our motto, I suppose, or our mission statement, is to bring people from crisis to Christ-centered hope and restoration. So in that context, we're assessing physical needs, seeking to meet people where they're at, but then also pressing in, not just for the mercy of the moment for those physical needs, but even the greater mercy of where is their soul at, and wanting to see how we can pray for them, encourage them, but also in the situation where somebody is not, they don't know Christ. As opportunity arises, we want to be able to press into that and share what our hope is and where our confidence in eternity is as well. Because the reality is, this life is incredibly short, and where we will be for eternity is eternal, right? And so we want to meet both needs as we can. For programming, I shared a little bit that we've got an afternoon kind of time where people can come in. So individuals will be coming in from, I think, like 1:30 to 4:30 throughout the week, and they'll come in. They'll kind of fill out a paper that just gives us some initial information. Then we'll sit down with them, do an interview, kind of assess where they're at, and then move forward with help from there. As I mentioned as well, Friday mornings we have a produce distribution. Brother, here, you've been to that, right? You've been a couple times there. So remind me, what's your name again? Rigo. Okay, great. Good to see you again. Yeah. And so you can ask questions of him as well. He's seen how it goes. But we have an interesting way that has played out is that the Latino community has really come together for that. And so we'll have 200 people gather in a basement that's not that large and bring in a ton of food, and the community really has owned that time and helps bring the food down the staircase, and we've had people coming in to speak Spanish and to be able to communicate well in that situation, and so that's been interesting seeing that develop over the last few years, and but that's going to be more the perishable items, more fresh food, and we work with Second Harvest, and Second Harvest Heartland is one, and the food group is the other. And so we get food at an incredibly reduced rate through them. Let me pull up a stat here. If you've ever seen, food shelves, I'm sure Jericho Road is not the only one, but often encourage, yes, bring in food, donate food, that is a good thing, but if for people to donate financially, that goes a lot farther. It's remarkable how much a food shelf, the buying power that a food shelf has to get food. That there's a stat here that, in this case, in 2017, we were able to, for every dollar that came in, we were able to kind of pack a punch of close to $6 of usefulness in purchasing food and in serving people. Because of Heartland, other organizations that partner with food shelves like Jericho Road. I could say more, but does anybody have questions, thoughts? Anything to throw out? Yeah, so Pastor Roland had shared a little bit. Jeff Noyad had been an assistant director at CES, and through the process of kind of the direction that the ELCA had been going, they just had become not a good fit anymore. And Pastor John Erickson at Jubilee had approached Jeff one morning and asked him, what do you think about starting a food shelf, a Christ-centered food shelf, kind of separate from this? And Jeff took time, prayed about that. As kind of a core group, some people gathered to pray over the span of a few months. And then in January of 2011, we launched. One of the things that Jeff had been praying for is, Lord, raise $50,000. Like, we don't have any finances for this, but if you raise $50,000, that's enough for us to kind of kick off and begin. And the Lord brought it about, brought it together. And so He has also been faithful to provide every year since then for a budget. And so Jeff Noyad was kind of the key actor, catalyst there, but the Lord is working, obviously, behind that.
$50,000 is the budget for the whole year?
For the first year, yeah, that was kind of I think the starter there. But Jericho Road operates at about $200,000 a year right now as a budget. 11% of that is for fundraising and staffing. The other 89% all goes to the work of the ministry in the neighborhood. Great questions. Any other questions?
I'm sure it's complicated, but what are some of the reasons for food prices?
Yeah, that is complicated. I don't have a great answer. Yeah, you know, I really don't know that I could answer that from a systemic kind of why is there certainly there is quite a bit of poverty in our neighborhood. I think it's 23% of families are below the poverty line, and so I think that's some reasons I have seen. Yeah, would be the families in poverty. I know that substance abuse sometimes plays into that as well. I've seen families where alcoholism has been a factor in that, and in the family not having food, and you wonder how are you able to have alcohol and yet not have food, and that addiction I guess is a piece of that. But I'm sure others could throw out plenty of reasons as well. I don't have a thorough answer. Sorry, but.
About how many people you guys work with or minister to?
Yeah. I've got information here, so I'm not shooting from the hip. So in 2017, we had interviews or worked with 12,402 households. So that's a pretty wide swath. As far as clients served, including children, be up over 45,000. First-time visitors in 2017, we had 7,913. So yeah, so some of those things are getting a birth certificate for a family, funding for that, or coming to the food shelf, or it can be a wide spectrum of things that we may have done. But yeah, those are some of the figures there. Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I guess I just introduced myself as Jeff's minion, but I kind of shadow Jeff. I work with him. I'm most regularly on Friday mornings. I've been in the afternoons on interviews. I'm actually with Jubilee Community Church, which meets in the same building, and I've been commissioned by the elders to kind of be a liaison between the church and the ministry there. So Bethlehem Baptist has the official ties with Jericho Road, but since we're in the same building, we try as much to have unofficial bridges, so to speak, there, where we have congregants from the church involved in the ministry, and the desire is then for people who are coming in as clients to come on upstairs during church service and to be involved. And so that's my piece of it. So I've been involved with Jericho Road 4 or 5 years, I suppose. Yeah, we do not yet. And so Potterhorn neighborhood, where the church is located, is in the low 30s, I think 30-something% Hispanic or Latino there. And so our desire is for something there. And so we're trying to think through, is it best for us to partner with another church or have something in-house? And we've been trying to navigate that. So we don't have anything at this time. We'd love for you to come over and help us think through that. But we're trying to figure that out, because we also, another desire of Jubilee, to speak of the church, is that we do desire to reflect the neighborhood that we're in, though that doesn't happen overnight, obviously. Yeah. Yeah, we do have information we give out, and so it's on a rotating basis, maybe a couple times a year. We might have some information. We have information posted, but yes, that's part of it as well. Not just giving out nutritious food, but also education in that. And so various times people will come through and maybe share on a Friday morning a bit about it. But yeah, that is our desire as well, in the development part of developing wise choices in that regard. Yeah.
I would say that as a pastor, having served in this neighborhood for 30 years, I would say the hardest question to answer is, how do you help people without creating dependency? How do you help people without making life worse for them? And that has been, the way it's been approached since after World War II. There have been many changes and a lot of different ideas. First we thought people were poor because they didn't have enough money. Well, they tried giving money away, but that didn't really help anything. So then they decided, well, really what we should do is they need work. But they couldn't work because they didn't have education. So then they started educational programs. And they realized the educational programs didn't work very well because they couldn't read, because they'd never learned. So then they started Head Start, which then started teaching them earlier and so forth. And it's incredibly complex. My guess right now, and I've changed my mind on this a few times, is that if you were to get to the center of the onion, peel back all the layers of the onion, I think you'd find there's three cores. Some form of chemical dependency, oftentimes some form of mental illness, depression, generational, whatever, and so forth, anxiety and so on. And in there also, and I don't know how to say this, and I don't know how to say it politically correctly, but structural, repeated, generational, single-parent families. I have tremendous respect for single parents, but this structure of society where we have developed a norm of single-parent families seems to have an awful lot to do with poverty as well. And kids having problems, and all the other urban problems, I think, fold out of those. And I may be wrong. Maybe there's something in the middle beyond that. There's such a thing as original sin. Yeah, okay. Good evening, amazing student. I hope you've got baby pictures with you. Got some on your phone? Graduate of our program, our college program, and so. Are you anxious to start like right now, or can I give them a potty break? Okay, I see puddles forming. So, all right, thank you very much. And where are you parked? In the parking lot, or are you parked on the street? Okay, we'll walk you out. Okay, very good. Thank you. And you've got 6 minutes and 37 seconds. Go. All right, now, it wasn't long ago that you were in this class. What is that, about 10 years ago? 8 years ago? Oh, didn't you take this one? Oh, okay, you took the other, gotcha, okay. You just had the one on steroids, okay. Anyway, we have two outstanding Christian schools in this neighborhood. Hope Academy is one, and here for much, much longer, and a tremendous, tremendous job, and a tremendously dedicated staff and solid believers. It's Trinity First Lutheran School, and these guys have stuck here through all the crack wars and through all the decades, and it is a ministry of faithfulness and a ministry of creativity and guts and tremendously hard work. And Anna came to us as a student from Concordia, and got to know those guys, and she is, well, you're kind of the right hand of the principal, aren't you? Or what would be your official title now? Ministry Support Coordinator. Just call her boss. And very, very smart, tremendous student, and the stories that I hear about your work at Trinity First, I'm very proud of you. I still want to see those baby pictures. So, Anna Shaw Van Vliet, am I saying that right? Yes, is here to tell us a little bit about their good work. And again, this is an outstanding ministry of great integrity. And so, that's all, folks.
Good to see you too. So I'm not really big on, just tell you all kinds of stuff. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit and then give you a chance to ask some questions. So, so Trinity First was actually the first Lutheran church that was there, and it was actually the church that started the school about 160 years ago. So it's been around a while, and there are people who believe that our school is actually one of the first schools in the metro area even that started here. We don't know for sure, but there's evidence that it could be one of the first. So we started age 3, and we go all the way up to 8th grade. So we used to call it our preschool program, 3 and 4-year-olds, but now we actually say, no, we're a grade school that starts at age 3, because we believe that what we're doing in the 3-year-old and 4-year-old classroom is important for education when they're in 8th grade, when they're in 3rd grade, all the way through school, because they learn through play, they learn through napping, they learn through all these other things that they do in the classroom. We have a wide variety, very diverse group of students. A lot of families are immigrants. About half of them are immigrants, mostly from Africa. But we also have some Hmong. We have some Native American. Well, Native Americans aren't immigrants, but it's very diverse. I started as a teacher there, and now I work as a support staff in the office. And 1 year, my classroom had 12 students, and each one of them had a different ethnic background. So, that just tells you, there's a wide variety there. We have a special education program, which is not something that a lot of private schools have, so that's kind of been our niche. About 30% of our students are special education students. So we have a full-time special education teacher, and we also added on an assistant because her caseload just got to be too big. And so for a lot of our families, we are kind of the last resort school. So we have some kids who start at age 3 and they're able to work their way through, and it's a great education for them. But then we also have students who come in at 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade because it just didn't work in other schools. They didn't have the support that they need. It was too big, or there was just a lot. They just kind of slipped through their class. They were quiet students, so it wasn't always noticed that they needed some of that extra support and extra help. And so, we've had 4th graders who've come in and they don't know how to write. They're scribbling. And we've had students with very, very significant behavioral and emotional needs. And, there does come a point where we can't service them anymore because we just don't have that one-on-one support. But we do the best we can with what we have. Another fact for you is we take anyone and everyone. So even though we're a Christian school, we don't say you have to be a Christian to come. We don't say you have to, believe in such and such, but we would take anyone. So about 40% of our only about 40% of our students actually go to church or say they go to church, which, sometimes you say you go to church, that could be Christmas and Easter. So we have quite the opportunity to share Jesus with our students there. We actually had one family, they're not there anymore, but the mom was a witch. And so, the Spirit is at work there. And they left, and we believe part of that was just because of the spiritual warfare, and they had to find something to take their student out, and they're not there anymore. But we just pray that the years that student was there, that seeds were planted, and that we have the opportunity to continue to minister to them, and that that child keeps thinking back to her time at Trinity First and what she learned about Jesus. We also believe in holistic education, so we're not just about the academics, but we're about the whole family and the whole student. So we have parent education nights. So twice a month on Tuesday nights, we invite speakers to present to our families, present to our parents, and then we have childcare available so that it's for the whole family. We start with a meal because, free meal, why not come to a free meal? And then we break into the students and we break into the parents. So the parents attend sessions on parenting or finances or technology or things that are applicable to them, and then the kids get to play. So the kids want to come because they get to play with their friends, and the parents want to come because it's educational. And we also, have we get a lot of donations. We're supported by a lot of individuals and churches around the area, even in other parts of the country, and we depend on those because only about 4% of our income is from tuition. 96% is donations, and we just leave it to the Lord that He brings in what we need to let our ministry continue. And also people bless us so that we can bless kids as well. This year we have a family who has just really been struggling. I mean, we have a lot of low-income families, but this family we heard ended up moving to a hotel for a little bit, and they've been without a car for a while, and just lots of challenges like that. They have 4 kids from 6th grade all the way to age 3. And the preschool teacher noticed that the 3-year-old kept coming in with just a really, really light fleece. And I mean, that's not enough with this cold weather coming. And so we got a donation of a really nice warm winter coat. And the teacher sent me a picture of the girl just beaming from ear to ear after she got that coat. And that was one of the first smiles that they had seen all year. But, it's just amazing what something as simple as a coat can do. Yet at the same time, we think about, okay, we're, you just never know what difference something small can make. So those are just kind of the nuts and bolts. I know that was a lot at once, and I kind of went from point to point to point. But what questions do you have? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good question. So we have a tiered tuition system. So we do qualifications based on whether you qualify for free lunch, reduced lunch, or full lunch. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there are different income guidelines with the federal government that determine whether if you go to a public school you would get your lunch for free, or you get your lunch at a reduced cost, or you'd be paying full price. And so we have these 3 tiers, and each tier is a different tuition cost. And that tuition cost is for the entire year, and it's for the entire family. So if you have 1 kid, it's the same price as if you have 5 kids. And we want that because, every family is a little different. And, the more kids you have, the more expensive things can get. And then we have ways for parents to work that tuition down. So if you qualify for the free price tier, if you participate in every single event, we call it the Parent Participation Program, by the end of the year, you could be paying nothing for your tuition. So events that count for parent participation: attending parent-teacher conferences, attending those family education nights, attending our choir events, getting all your paperwork done on time at the beginning of the year. What other? So examples like that. And we did that because we don't just want to give it to them, but at the end of the year, parents who have spent that time working down their tuition feel really accomplished, and they feel like, hey, you know what? I didn't have the money to pay for this, but I was able to come in and work or do whatever to make that happen. And they can, if you qualify for reduced price meals, you still could get your tuition close to zero because you have the opportunity to also volunteer. And each of our volunteer hours counts for a dollar amount off of their tuition. So this is the third year that we've done it, and it's been a really, really good system. Parents, now that we're into the third year of it, are really starting to grasp how they can make it work in their favor. And our secretary, who does all the tuition balancing and calling and stuff, just always talks about how happy she is to be able to call a family and bring them the good news of, guess what? You don't owe any tuition this year because you were able to work it off. Or guess what? You only owe $20 because you were able to work so much of it off. And some of those parents are like, wait, really? That really? And they're so excited about it. So, yeah. Yep. Yeah, so we have about 130 this year. We're actually down enrollment a little bit. We used to have lots and lots of waiting lists, but we think this is just an opportunity God has given us to breathe because our building is really small for what we do. We have turned our cafeteria into a classroom. We've turned storage closets into classrooms. We've turned our stage into a classroom because we just don't have the space. We have about 4 toilets for all students, and we just can't do it all. So we were around 150, and now we're down a little bit, and it's just been a great opportunity to really deepen some of those relationships with the families and feel like you're not fighting for the bathroom all the time. And we have kids with some more significant needs this year. In the 3-year-old class, we have a girl with Down syndrome. And so just being able to focus that extra attention without a class full of 20 kids is really nice. So, yeah. Did that answer? Okay. Any other questions? One of the things that and you briefly mentioned that, is that, we get to share Jesus in school. If working in a public school, there's certainly a place for Christians there. But I think it would be hard for me to work in a public school and not get to share my faith. And, when we talk to kids, when there are conflicts, when there are issues between students, we get to talk to them about Jesus' love and grace. And we get to talk to them about, well, what does Jesus want us to do? And what does Jesus say about this? And, so many of them come from such broken families. And the school is what's stable. When I was growing up, I always looked forward to breaks because, we got to go home and not have to go to school and not have homework. But sometimes it's the flip side for a lot of our students. They actually start dreading the breaks because they don't know what they're going to do. They could just be stuck at home all day, or maybe they're going to be in charge of their 5, 6 siblings babysitting them at home, or maybe they'll have to go with mom and dad somewhere because they don't have enough money to pay for a babysitter or a nanny, or don't have alternative solutions. Yeah. So just that opportunity we have to be that stability and be that constant focus and or constant in their life. And we do have parents who were students there and they're bringing their kids back, and that's really exciting because okay, if they have fond memories and feel that there is something there that they want to bring their kid back, then all right, what is God doing and how can he continue to work through us with their kids then? And some students we have for 10 years, from kindergarten 3 all the way up to 8th grade, and some of them we have for 2 weeks. So, you just never know. And you just pray that God continues to use us and that he's doing what he wants. So, yeah. Yeah, yep, all day. Yeah. So, they have nap time. They nap pretty much all afternoon, but, yeah. And part of that is just because most parents need it for all day, to be able to work and that kind of thing. And also, it just gives more stability then, too. So, yeah. Yep, so 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, it's all the same schedule as the 8th graders, so. Thank you. No, I'm like 30 hours. I try hard. I've
talked this babysitter man into giving him his Halloween candy. Oh, my parents do that all the time. We come home and he's got everything tasted. Everything is unwrapped. And it's stuck all over his jammies. It's stuck all over his bed. He's got chocolate from one end to the other. Okay, thrill seekers. Who are we missing tonight? Okay. Okay, so we have got, okay, we've got salt, we've got, no, salt. We've got pepper, I think somebody's locked out. Salt, and we've got Jericho Road.
Come on board.
And we've got Trinity. That's Trinity. Trinity first. And we have Jesus in the City, which they abbreviate differently, but that's how I've always done it. Okay, so we have 8 people. How many people in class? 10?
We have 12 and 12 total.
Okay. Okay.
3 per.
Oddly enough, that works. Oops. Okay, now, we've got to do this quickly because we've got a game to play. I mean, let's talk about priorities. So, the hat is there. Does anybody have any questions about the assignment? You're going to go as a group. You'll have to find a time that you can do this as a group. Use your conference call function on your phone maybe, and call the person, and or however you want to do it. Suggest some times that you guys would be available. It's always more challenging when you're trying to get more than 2 people together for meetings. Welcome to ministry. Do not let this go until the end of the assignment, because remember, they're doing you a favor by getting you in there. Between now, Thanksgiving, and with all the rest of it, they are very, very busy. So you need to make contact this week. Let me say that again. Look at my lips. You need to make contact this week with your provider, okay? I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying it would be nice. You must make contact with your people this week and get the time set up. If you say, well, I'm going to wait till the last minute to set this up, they don't have to meet with you. I mean, they're going to try. It's very, very hard. But if you say, well, we get 3 days and you have to meet with us, oh, there goes April. Anyway, they may be gone on a conference or whatever. So you have to make contact with them immediately. And it's hard getting contact with somebody. And it's harder to reach somebody by telephone today than it was 30 years ago. People don't return calls. If they don't return the call within a couple hours, don't feel afraid to call back. The rules have changed. Okay? All right. Draw the first piece of paper. Can you read it? November. That says November. Do we have any Novembers?
When is Aaron's birthday?
My nerves are trying to keep a string tighter than the football. Okay, well, there went that one. All right, pull one here. Okay, Sept. You got any September babies like my mom? You guys are weird. Okay, pull one.
August, I think.
That's August, yeah, that's my writing, yeah. I wrote this in my writing to myself. Okay, do we have any Augusts? Okay, we skipped you before word. All right. That's January, yep. Any Januaries? Like me? What are you guys all in the same month? This is like weird. Okay. May. Any Mays?
Have we covered
Okay, go on up.
September?
Yes.
Okay, because Aaron's birthday, he just told me, is in September.
Which group does he want to do?
I'll find out.
If he's not here, he gets last place.
All right, go ahead and pick yours. There's room for everybody, so. All right.
That.
That's October. Can you read English?
October.
October. Do we have an October? Go get him in October. Okay. What are your birthdays? We got you all stuck, stacked up. July. Any Julys?
Go Ward.
Are you a July?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is the, I don't know,
Can you reach it there? Oh, you want to do Jesus in the City? Okay. First Trinity is up there.
December.
Yes, we have one here with Paul. Paul is in December.
Rigo. Go Rigo.
Okay. All right. You pick one. February. You're on up. Come on up.
I got February.
February what?
Paul,
17.
he's the Paul. Yeah, yeah.
June. June. Yay! Look at them all go. What are you, June what? That's my dad's birthday. June 26th.
And September. Where should we put Aaron?
Whatever's left.
Whatever's left, really?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
but she's not here.
That's
Okay,
fine.
we'll just put Aaron, so whatever is left.
Stuck outside.
Which one did you want to do? Oh, wait, Jericho, okay, Aaron wants Salt or Jericho Road?
And the last one is March.
No, you shouldn't do that one.
All right. Great.
I'll put
March.
Aaron's name. You wanna put- With the Aaron.
Boy, that one easy. Okay, write that down.
And
Okay,
Paul.
write your groups down.
Yeah, so you have to hand on to both of them.
Okay,
Because you've got two guys who aren't.
go meet with your group quickly. You have 7 minutes to exchange phone numbers, cell phone numbers, email addresses. Businesses probably use email, or ministries probably use email addresses a lot.
Paul and Aaron and yourself. Now, let me.
Now talk about the times that you have common about being free, because that will save you a lot of time when you try to make contact. And one of you should become the contactor person. And I can give you some cell phones for some of these people. Chimani, would you like to play the game tonight? Because we need some more people. You want to play in the game? You don't want to play in the game? Okay, that's right. Okay, cool, that's fine.
typically when you guys print?
Be that way, see what I care. All right.
So I'm not really free Monday and Tuesday. Well, obviously none of us
vote
are
on
free
that.
Monday, but Tuesday's actually, I'm actually involved in one of our salt sites. Chris's site, so Wednesday, Thursday.
I was gonna see if it was my mother's handwriting. It is not.
Your mother would not do the wrong thing.
Before 3?
It's very nice.
She would follow directions and do everything right. The first time. Then she'd write a paper, and it would be the first paper in.
Let's
Yep.
go for
And be
daytime.
very
I bet
confident.
these guys will be able to do
And,
more than a day.
Yeah.
Yep, that sounds like her.
Not thinking about this week.
This would be after.
Your wife, if she gets name money, she'll just show. So she has to be the first one down. She has to get the best. Brenda doesn't go to school to learn. Brenda goes to school to compete. She finished her master's.
Go anytime.
Sister's thesis. She came back in the room and they said, "Young woman, we asked you to write us a
I
master's
will
thesis.
try to get in touch with these guys and say either Monday
You
next
did
week
not
after
write us a
this.
master's thesis.
It would have to be 2 or
You
later.
wrote us a doctoral dissertation."
Like, I'm sure I could use, like, I could take
That's the girl.
Either of those are.
Okay, got it figured out? Do we have it figured out? Got information shared? One person is chosen to be the contactor, and you've shared when the open times and your schedules are.
So I'm busy from noon till noon, so noon to be our best. If they're available, I'll be in touch.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. I'll keep you guys.
Yeah, maybe we should start a group text message or something.
Can you set that up?
I can send out the text.
Okay, I need one photocopy here. Cheryl, one of our sheets with Okay. All right, now, we've talked about cultures, we've talked about all the different things. Now we're gonna act them out. Everybody's got all their information? And if the person is missing, you've got that person worked out into your stuff? Okay, now, 3, 6, 9, 10. We're a little bit short on people here. Okay, so our groups are gonna have 2 or 3 in the groups. Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna read you the instructions. We can do that. Just pick the groups that are on the board unless we get some group that doesn't have 2 people here. Or is anybody missing more than one person? Okay. All right. You're going to get... Okay. Why don't you guys... Well, we can go by these 4, but then if one of you may have to sacrifice yourself to the other group so that we can have an equal number, 2 or 3 people in each group, okay? Okay. Now, tonight you get to do acting, you get to eat treats, and you get to have some fun. Now, okay, group 1, which is salt. Group 1 is salt. Group 1 is going to be back in that corner. You're going to pull the table just back in that corner, okay? Group 2 is going to be Jericho Road. Group 2, you're going to be in that corner. you can use those round tables if you don't have to move anything. Group 3 is going to be up here. That's Trinity First. And group 4 over here. Okay, so if you want to go to your area there.
Here's the two copies,
Very good. Oh, and their color. That's so nice.
and here's the original.
Okay. That one. And that one.
Anything else?
And then the original. There we go. Just put that here. There we go. All right, here's the instructions. Now, I want to just read these once, so try to catch it, because we're going to be tight on time. Objective, 3 objectives. Listening? Okay, so youth, which group are you guys? No, Jesus and City. So you guys, okay, I want you up in here. I want you in this front corner. Sorry. I want you up here in the front, because we have to have a little bit of distance, because you'll have to approach the other groups and stuff, all right? All right. To experience the cultural clash between people of different cultures, to assist participants in learning how to adapt in different cultural settings, to examine the scriptural connection between a person's culture and their view of God. All right. So, here we're going to read the statement. This exercise gives you the opportunity to design and act out a certain cultural role, because you're going to be inventing cultures. You've got a few hints as to what it is, but you're going to have to figure out your culture. Each group will receive a printed trait description and an instruction sheet. You will then develop your own cultural way of expressing yourselves following the instruction sheet and keeping in mind the trait that is distinctive about your group. And they're very different, and they're fun. You may be as verbal or as nonverbal as you want, and create as many gestures as possible. Gestures that for your, like we go this and that, and we, Norwegians do this a lot. No, anyway. Okay, so you may be as verbal or nonverbal as you want and create as many gestures as possible, but be careful that your group reflects the assigned cultural trait. After that, each group will visit the other cultural groups as instructed. So you'll be going to visit the other groups. Now, your M&Ms, that's your treats for your visitors. Okay, so you can't just chow down on them. This is what you're going to be sharing with your visitors, okay? Distribute one trait description sheet to each group according to their numbers. Instruct them to read through the trait description as a group. This takes about a minute. This should be done quietly so the other groups do not hear the description. It's important. Distribute one instruction sheet to each group. Read part of the instruction sheet to everybody and answer any questions that might arise. So you've got traits and you've got instructions. And then you've got a few minutes to develop your sequence. Things that you do, the way that you greet people, the way that you act towards strangers and so forth. So, okay, so this is group number uno. You guys are uno back here. Can you bring those guys their uno? Yes. And their M&Ms, okay? Doodly-doodly-do. And group number dos. Why am I humming a march? Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then you guys are number 4. Here you go. Okay, so you guys can read the your trait quietly, and then I'll go over the instruction sheet. Do not write on the papers. Do not write on the papers. That little sheaf of papers cost us about $20. We have lost it a couple times, so we have 3 sets of the game, but don't write on them. And we can't just make copies, and give them out and stuff because it's all copyrighted. Just go with the first group, first one. So when you get to the instruction sheet, then you have to figure out what you're going to be doing as far as how you do all those things when the group comes or you go to the other group. If you make your gestures or your customs a little more outrageous, it's even more fun. Think of Monty Python and the Department of Funny Walks. Well, anyway. Sure. Share foreign cultures' food and get a chance to know them and so forth. You cultural weirdos. Okay, anyway, here's what we're going to do. All right, so round one. Now, you all know your group number, right? Okay, group 2 visits group 1, and you're going to act out your own culture when you come there to greet. And group 4 visits group 3. Group 4 visits group 3, and group 2 visits group 1. All right, on your mark, get set, go.
You like it, don't you?
We saw you come from all the way over there. Are you liking the food? It's pretty good.
Okay, good idea, yeah. You want somebody, be careful. You're going to go out this way?
Yeah, I have to get my coat and then I'll just go in, yeah.
Okay.
I will be back right.
All right. Okay, it's time to say goodbye. Okay, go back to your groups now. Go back to your corner and write. Now, don't write it on the sheets, but write someplace there your experience of that group and your impressions of what the other group's culture was like. Okay, so you guys write down theirs, and those guys write down yours. And you've got about 3 minutes to do that. Talk it over with yourselves as to what you learned about that other culture, what was notable about them, how did they react. What did you learn about that other culture? Be sure to write their group name down. One minute. Okay, round two. Group 3 visits group 2. So group 3 visits group 2. And, I'm sorry, group 3 visits 2, sorry. And group 1 visits 4. 3 visits 2, 1 visits 4. I'm glad this is all written down. Now go in character. Not gonna march. I think we have to give the Academy Award. Okay, time to say fond farewells. Okay, quickly write down your group's impressions of the other culture. That's group 3. Oh, that's group 1 over there. They were group 1. Okay, write down your reflections. I've had too much chocolate. One minute. Okay, are you ready? Okay, round 3. Group number 3. Are you listening? Okay, group number 3 visits group 1. No, group 3 visits 1, and group 4 visits 2. So you guys go there, and you guys go there, right? Yep. Okay. Okay, say your fond farewells and come on home. Please bring your sheets up. You can finish up your M&Ms. Oops, I missed. You can finish up your M&Ms, stick them in your pockets. Anyway, purses, whatever. Okay, let's bring everybody back to class. You can sit with your groups, I guess would probably be the best. Okay, let's talk about group number 1. Talk about what was their culture like, those of you who visited them or were visited by them. Group number 2, what did you think of group number 1? What were they? Can I get your sheets back? There we go. Okay, yep. You just pass them up to the front and that'll be adequate. Okay, group number 2, what did you think of group number 1? What was their culture like?
They're like firm and
Here.
I think they were firm, kind of like rude, selfish, traditional. Oh, we're not supposed to?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. That's kind of what we got for them. Yeah.
Group 3, what did you think of them?
Similar. They were just they were very business oriented. They were harsh. They were cold. They didn't want to really touch or have fun. They're very task oriented.
I'm not going to comment what the group usually calls that group, but I'm just going to. Anyway, go ahead. Yes. They named them by a country name, but I'm not going to go there. Okay.
I know it is. Anybody else?
Okay, group 4. What did you think of group 3? Or group 1?
We thought they were just like really rude, and they just like went straight to our food and didn't really like wait for us to invite. They just like did it themselves, and like they just were in it for a business meeting basically. Yeah. Yeah.
They got it done. Okay. All right. Let's talk about group 2. Or group 1. Did they, is that what you were trying to portray?
Yes, we just read our traits.
Yeah.
So group 1, you are a lordly, martial, highly regimented people with a sense of superiority. It shows in your gestures and speech. You like organization and things always in their place. When guests arrive, you take charge and, though you treat them well, you insist they do things your way.
I'm not going to say it. Okay. Yes, good. All right. All right. Group number 2. You guys, let's see. Let's talk. Okay, group number 1. What did you tell me about? What did you think? What did you guys think about group number 1? No, group number 2.
Group number 1, talking about group number 2.
Yes.
We wrote down very friendly, nice, thankful, kind of a demure culture, kind of placating, like whatever you say, very respectful, kind of what we noticed about group number 2.
Group number 2. Okay, group number 3. What did you guys think about group number 2?
We said that they seemed very afraid of offending us, and they seemed like they spent a lot of time alone or away from their family, and they were always apologizing because things weren't perfect. They called us honored guests and treated us that way, and they were uncomfortable with affection.
It's kind of self-deprecating.
that every, oh, we're sorry, some of the food is broken and there's scratches on the table, and just apologetic for about everything.
Yeah, they seemed like they really went out of their way for little things that didn't really matter, but yeah, just like very overreacting.
You are a gentle, meek, submissive people with a lot of grace and movement in your gestures and speech. When guests approach, you put them in a superior position and are apologetic in the way you treat them. Okay? By the way, there are cultures like each of these. Okay? All right, group 3. Group 1, what did you learn about group 3?
Way too friendly. Smiley.
They wanted to hug you and greet you and touch you all the time and wanted to be friends. And too much, I guess.
Yeah, we kind of said they're kind of American. Like they're very, very friendly, but like almost like we would always want them to come back, but we'd be a little bit overwhelmed after they like we wouldn't want them to stay too long because we'd get a little bit overwhelmed. But we liked them.
Kind of the same. They were just overwhelming and like super extroverted. They were like Minnesota nice, sort of. Whatever. No, but like the Minnesota nice is like being super extroverted. It's almost fake. It is fake.
Okay, group 3, you're a very warm, friendly, expressive people with gestures that go along with warmth and friendliness. When guests arrive, you are open and free in the way you treat them, trying hard to please them. That real well. I that out loud a few times. Okay, Grupo Cuatro. Did everybody get to comment on group 3? Okay, so Group Uno, what did you talk about?
So group 4, way too relaxed, didn't pay much attention to us, didn't greet us well, very, very casual, quiet, like they talked amongst each other quietly but didn't engage us much.
Say they're like free flowing, kind of like the hippies in the back in the day. Just kind of went with the flow. Didn't care about much. Like kind of like a stoner, if you know, like those guys are. Just wanted to eat the M&Ms too. Just manhandled them.
We said it was hard to get to know them. They were quiet and reserved, didn't say much. Very slow eaters, few comments. Seemed like they weren't having a very good time.
Now, here's what theirs was. You have a very calm, relaxed outlook on life, which borders on being lackadaisical. You are unhurried in what you do. When guests arrive, you acknowledge their presence and do get around to serving them, but hurry is abhorrent to you. All right. Now, as each of your groups, as you heard each of your groups described, were there any misattributions? Did somebody misunderstand what you were trying to say? Did anybody feel that the descriptions were unfair or inaccurate?
Well, people kept saying that we were a little bit like too apologetic, but that it was how we were trying to show up.
Sure. Okay. Okay. When we deal with another culture, oftentimes we misinterpret what other people are trying to do. Okay. Well, this is one more way to act out what cultures are. And it's kind of a silly one, but you do get to eat M&Ms. And it's a lot of fun. This game has been used all over the country, and it's been used for a couple decades. But it always seems to go over, and usually at the end of the class, at the end of the year, people say this is one of the most fun evenings. So, I don't know. You get to eat M&Ms too. Now, I'll show you how this works out. Now, we have this cabin up in northern Minnesota we've been working on the last couple of years. And it has 2 bedrooms, and then there's an upstairs loft, and it has a king-size bed and 3 cots. And then the downstairs really doesn't have any sleeping stuff, and it's all guys. Except this time, you're going to get to meet, well, I'm not going to say that. Well, we had a Hmong pastor friend come, and he and his wife do everything together. And she wanted to come along, and so she came along. And they were going to, I said, well, why don't you sleep inside? We'll move things around, and you guys can be there. And I hadn't really thought about it one way. There's a whole bunch of ways we could have done that. And he turned it down, and the next time he turned it down, and the next time he turned it down. And they no, we're going to sleep in the car. We're going to sleep in the car. We're going to sleep in the car. Well, it was about 30 degrees out there. We're going to sleep in the car. And we, as they went outside, the rest of us started talking. They're going to freeze. It's terrible out there. And I own the cabin. I'm 65, but I'm not the senior member. Another guy's dad and my dad started hunting together during World War II. And he's 10 years older than me. And he's kind of now the patriarch of the camp. And this is a culture that really respects an elder. And this is a 75-year-old guy. Good guy. I said, Roy, okay, you're the senior here. He said, you making fun of my age? I said, no. This is a culture that really respects elders. And I tried my best. I said, why don't you go out there and just say, you need to come in here and we will move things around so you have a nice place and you can stay warm. Now, they've been out there about 10 minutes at this point, and we're squunched up in the back seat of their car. And he went out and he said, you need to come in here. You need to come in. We'd like to have you in here. You need to be warm, and please come in. Now, with him asking, they came in. And I said, Roy, see what you've got here. You've got a cultural thing here. They almost couldn't say no to you. And they probably also were starting to freeze to death out there. They've slept in their car other years or in the back of the truck or different things. And but this time they listened. And we were able to work around so they had some degree of, as the British would say, privacy. And we were all able to handle it. But it was a cultural thing. And I happened to catch on to a way so that they would feel comfortable, but also would feel that they had to respond, and they were very happy they did. But there's 1,000 little ways in which you deal with cultures, and you deal with the people of the cultures. And for example, right now, if you were Somalis, what would be the problem? What am I doing wrong here? Showing you the bottom of my foot, right. I couldn't do that. Now, that's a habit of mine. And I have to be very careful when I'm dealing with Somali people, because you can't do that. That's as rude as it gets, showing somebody the bottom of your foot. So there's a bazillion things like that, but when you're going to do ministry with somebody, you have to enter their culture humbly. You have to enter their culture understanding that it's going to be different. You have to enter that culture and learn how things work. Now, 42 years ago, I did my internship in a Norwegian-American town in Colfax, Wisconsin. Now, I grew up around Norwegian people in a Norwegian church with a Norwegian mom, but I learned that when it was a Norwegian-American community, things work differently. A lot of passive-aggressive stuff, a lot of ways that communication happened through back channels. Saying one thing meant something very different. You had to decode it. And I'd never run into this before. And I thought I knew the culture. But I was surprised because I had to learn to speak Wisconsin Norwegian, so to speak, and learn how to communicate and what people were trying to say when they said something. And I don't know that I was ever that good at it, but the pastor was a master of decoding what was really being said. And he wasn't paranoid or anything. He was a very healthy, mentally healthy guy, but he understood these people. So, anyway, all right. Does everybody understand this, the assignment, the new assignment tonight? Okay, everybody's got a contactor that's going to make the contact this week? You're okay? Okay, and then don't forget the assignment you were given last week, because you're going to need to make a couple of contacts in the city here. And please drive home safely and stay warm and dry. Thank you for playing along tonight and being good players, and please take your M&Ms with you. Father, watch over us as we go, protect us, and we thank you for this wonderful, rich thing of culture. Help us to learn. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.